Hey, sir, I can't talk. I've been asked by Red Robin to make a presentation on, get this, existence. Confused by what that means? Yeah, join the club. Where the hell do I even start? How do I even start? Should I just start talking about Metroid 2 and see where I end up? I'll be right back. So I came up with this.
Recently, I've been on a bit of a Metroid kick. Ever since I took a look at the first game last year, I played through Metroid Dread, started Super Metroid again, I bought the Metroid Prime Trilogy for the Wii, and I've been going through those games. I played Metroid Fusion on the Wii U Virtual Console.
Where did this come from?
And I got another game for the Wii that the internet keeps telling me doesn't exist. Not really sure what's up with that. At this point, I feel like I've played enough Metroid where I can actually feel comfortable calling myself a fan of the series.
Of course, there are a couple pretty important games that I haven't played yet. Unfortunately, I don't really have a great way of playing them. This is exactly what I was looking for.
You know, I have this minor issue where I like my physical DS games to actually have a purpose. So using emulation for handheld games like I have in the past made me really sad because while I was running New Super Mario Bros. Off my computer, I also had this perfectly working cartridge that wasn't even getting used. Like, what was even the point of me buying it then?
So voila! Now I have a 3DS with a capture card in it. Now we can play Metroid 2.
Metroid 2 exists. When people talk about the Metroid series, this game usually gets kind of glossed over. No one really pays attention to it. It kind of suffers from awkward sequel syndrome. Every good series has a game with awkward sequel syndrome. You know, the games that just try to copy what came before them but end up changing a bunch of things to make them worse, or the games that just abandon every idea the previous games had and do something completely different nobody asked for. Thankfully, in the case of Metroid 2, it's the former. And also thankfully, most of the changes and problems this game has are due to the limitations of the hardware it's on. We're on the Game Boy this time, which is even more limited than the NES. However, the developers really pushed this little brick. Aside from having a grayscale color palette, Metroid 2 is pretty on par graphically with the NES original. And a lot of that game's DNA can be found here in the sequel. On November 5th, 1991 in North America, January 21st, 1992 in Japan, and May 21st, 1992 in Europe, Metroid 2 Return of Samus was given to the people. And the world was not any better or worse because of it.
I'm excited! I actually really enjoyed my time with the first game, so I'm looking forward to seeing what the sequel will be like.
So the plot. All of the Yoshis are kind of just hanging out and...
This is the wrong game.
After Samus stops the space pirates from weaponizing the Metroids in the first game, all of the Prime games happen apparently. But then after all that, the Galactic Federation decides to send a crew out to the Metroid's home planet of SR-388 to exterminate every single last one of the things. But after 1, 2, 3 separate missions fail and are never heard from again, the Federation goes, "F*** it, send in one lady by herself." And that's where the game starts.
And to be fair, Samus by herself has solved pretty much every problem involving the Metroid so far, so it is at least somewhat understandable to send her in alone. I'm just saying, it might be kind of nice to have some backup. Might get done a little bit faster and I won't have to sit through let's just play the game.
My thoughts on Metroid 2 are almost identical to my thoughts on the first game.
Yep, alright, that's it, see ya!
Alright, fine, I do have more to say than that. The goal of Metroid 2 is to explore SR-388 and hunt down the 39 Metroids living within its cave systems. Seems simple enough. However, this game introduces a brand new concept, Metroid Evolution. Turns out, over time, Metroids evolve and mutate into giant lizard things. You've got Alpha Metroids, Gamma Metroids, Zeta Metroids, and Omega Metroids, and it's these new forms that you'll see and hunt down throughout the game.
You know, video games have the opportunity to let you live out fantasies you'd never be able to in real life. Metroid 2 satiates my desire to single-handedly cause an entire species to go extinct.
It's kinda an interesting premise, although I do have somewhat mixed feelings on it. On the one hand, it does make progression really satisfying. You've got this Metroid tracker in the bottom right corner that always tells you how many Metroids are left. You can always clearly see how far you have left to go, and having the counter tick down as you progress is actually pretty motivating. But then on the other hand, 39 is a lot. And the fights against these things don't really ever get more interesting. The rooms you fight them in can vary, but most of the time whenever there's a gimmick, it's just annoying. Like take for example these rooms with the destroyable blocks. You'd think this would make for a more interesting fight, you know, having an expandable arena or whatever, but the blocks respawn as soon as they go off screen, so the fight is actually super cramped and claustrophobic and not fun. And the Metroids themselves aren't really all that fun to fight either. They all move in basically the same way, so you can just find a corner to stand in and proceed to pump them full of missiles.
Now, Metroid games are well known for their expansive worlds with tons of secrets to find and huge areas to explore and a whole bunch of backtracking, and really, why else do you think I'm bringing this up?
Metroid 2 is organized really weirdly. The map's essentially split up into sections, and you can only progress to the next section after you've destroyed all the Metroids in the section you're currently in. Which means this game's really linear. I feel like this might be a good time to bring up something I forgot to mention when I was talking about the first game, but I did use a map to help me then. Okay, look, I know. I feel super guilty about it too, but seriously, this game kind of needs a map. Okay, it doesn't need one, but it sure as hell makes navigation a whole lot more bearable. It wouldn't be impossible without a map. I still feel like the rooms are distinct enough that you could figure out where you are and have a rough idea of where to go just playing through the game without any outside help. But having a map does help with getting to a specific area. Like going back to get the ice beam at the end of the game. You might have a general idea of where the ice beam is, but having a general idea is not really going to help you actually get the ice beam, is it? So I don't want to hear about how my opinion on the game is invalid because I cheated or didn't play the game how it was intended or didn't draw the map out in these vague blobs in the manual.
We're getting off topic.
The reason I bring this up is because I barely needed a map for Metroid 2. Yes, I did still use a map because it is still kind of easy to get turned around in some instances.
Stop cheating when you play Metroid. Who the hell cares enough about this to throw a brick through my window?
Anyways, my point is that I did not need to use the map all that much because this game is structured in a very linear, very simple way. You have this huge pool of lava in the middle of the map, and once you clear all the Metroids in an area, there's a little earthquake, which means the lava has drained a little bit and you can progress to the next area. And the different areas themselves really aren't all that complex. There are some branching pathways, but they're pretty much just a big circle. And the Metroids really aren't all that hidden. If you just do a quick sweep through the whole section, you'll find all of them no problem. And then you move on to the next area. It's super easy.
Now, I know what you're thinking, and you're right. This does make a lot of sense for a handheld game.
One thing I really respect about Nintendo is how they design handheld games differently from their console ones. When you're playing a console game, you're usually playing it with the intention of sitting down with it for a good few hours. But with a handheld, how long you're gonna spend playing it can vary wildly. Maybe you are playing it for a couple hours, or maybe you're just playing for a few minutes on the bus commuting to work, or in the backseat of your Uber going to Red Robin or whatever. And a lot of Nintendo's handheld games are designed with that mentality where they can be enjoyed for any amount of time, and Metroid 2 is no different. You can get through an area in roughly 20 to 40 minutes depending on how big the area is and how bad you are at video games.
Which if you're anything like me, then you're very bad at video games.
Fortunately, if you're a little short on time, Metroid 2 adds one more little quality of life change that wasn't in the first game, which is the ability to save your progress. Yes, no longer will you need to write down an absurdly long string of arbitrary characters to pick up kinda where you left off.
Damn it, I bought an entire notebook for that.
Now there are these little save stations around the map so you can save your progress, turn the game off to go to Red Robin or whatever, come back and pick up right where you left off.
Unfortunately, there is one rather big problem with making the game super linear. The game is super linear.
There's really no need to ever backtrack or go to a previous area for any reason. Once you exterminate all the Metroids in an area, you're done there. There's nothing left to do and no reason to go back. The only reason I could think of to backtrack would be to go all the way back to your ship to refill your health and missiles, because you can't remember where any of the spots are to do that on the rest of the map. But honestly, who's stupid enough to do that? Which, oh yeah, that reminds me, one of my biggest problems with the first game was rectified 30 years before I would even make the complaint. There's now little spots littered around the map where you can refill your health and missiles, and it's amazing! Now instead of having to farm enemies for half an hour, you could just backtrack to one of these and refill everything in a fraction of the time. Of course, Samus still runs really slow, so it'll still probably take like 5 minutes, but last time I checked, 5 minutes is faster than 30 minutes.
Sorry, just gotta check again.
But that's really the only reason you'd ever need to backtrack in this game. Unless, of course, you make it to Area 6 and realize you still haven't gotten the Various suit yet, so you look at the map you found at the internet and realize it's all the way back in Area 2 and you missed it somehow, so then you have to go all the way back to get it, but honestly, who's stupid enough to do that? To be fair, I don't really know what they could put in these areas to make it worth backtracking, but I feel like it would have been at least a little more Metroid-ish if, say, you went back to an older area with the space jump or something to unlock a new power-up. Or maybe Area 7 branches off Area 2, but you can only reach it with the screw attack or something. I don't know.
Wait, what the hell's a space jump?
New power-ups! We've gotta have new power-ups. There were only like 3 in the last game. Of course, we've still got the Morph Ball, and Bombs, and Ice Beam, and High Jump Boots, and Wave Beam, and Screw Attack, and Various Suit.
Okay, maybe a little more than 3.
Actually, fun fact, in the original game, the Various Suit just caused Samus' suit to change colors. But since Metroid 2 is on the Game Boy, which has a grayscale color palette, the Various Suit instead changes the look of Samus' suit entirely, giving her these big circular shoulder pads. And this would be the official look of the Various suit going forward. Look, it's even on the box art. But in terms of brand new power-ups, well, we've got the Spider Ball, which allows Samus to stick to any wall or ceiling and move freely along them while in Morph Ball form. And you get this pretty early on. It's one of the first items you get, which is honestly kinda nuts considering what it does. If you got Spider Ball this early in any other Metroid game, it would absolutely break everything. Maybe that's why they never brought it back. No, the Metroid Prime games don't count. No, Metroid Dread doesn't count either. What the hell are you talking about? In both these examples, you can only use it on certain specified walls. And in Dread, it's not even the Spider Ball, it's the Spider Magnet.
Wasn't expecting that to be what I got worked up about today.
Anyways, there's also the Spring Ball, which allows Samus to jump well in the Morph Ball. You actually get this on the same area you get the Various suit. They're pretty close to each other. I may have missed this one too. There's the Space Jump, which essentially gives Samus the ability to jump infinitely. I fucking hate this thing. It's not quite as simple as just being an infinite jump. There's a certain timing to it where if you press the button too early or too late, you won't get the extra jump. And this is how it works in every other 2D Metroid game going forward, but it's a lot more refined in those games. Considering this is the first game it shows up in, you bet it's gonna be finicky, and I just couldn't get it to work. I'd get a few good jumps in and start feeling confident I had the rhythm down, and then I just randomly mess up and fall back down the obnoxiously tall pit I was trying to jump out of. This thing sucks. And we've got 2 new types of beams. The Spacer Laser, which fires 3 beams out at once, and the Plasma Beam, which fires a single shot that can travel through pretty much anything. The Wave Beam is still the best. The Plasma Beam may be the strongest shot in the game, but I'd much rather have the extra range the Wave Beam gives. Yeah, unfortunately the beams still don't stack, so you still have to just pick one and stick with it for the whole game.
Alright, and I think that covers pretty much everything I wanted to talk about, so let's hurry up and get to the end of the game and talk about the final boss.
So the last little bit of Metroid 2 is basically a straight line. You kind of just follow the path until you end up in this huge open vertical room, which is actually a pretty great spot to practice your space jumps. Glad this is at the end of the game. There's a spot to save, a spot to refill your health and missiles, then you just go a little bit further along and what? Oh look! Just normal, regular, boring old Metroids!
Oh my god, now I have to go all the way back to get the Ice Beam!
Now wait, you can just get it right here. You know, I just realized Metroids are kinda at their strongest when they're babies. I mean, only at this stage do you have to freeze them before you can attack them with missiles, and only at this stage do they latch onto you and drain your life. Sure, the later stages do more damage, but the later stages aren't an absolute bitch to get off. Come on! So after suffering through all that, we finally come face to face with the Metroid Queen. This fight! So the Metroid Queen will shoot these homing projectiles at you, and then as soon as they're gone, it'll launch its fat, stupid, ugly face at you, and then you have to fire missiles at it, which is actually a huge pain because it's only weak in the head, and it's incredibly easy to miss. And I'm trying to get into a screw attack because you're basically invincible in it, but it's only working half the time, and the other half of the time when I try to shoot a missile back, Samus is facing the wrong way, and I can't get her to turn the fuck around! God, this is so stupid! And then I realized you could just shoot a missile in the Queen Metroid's mouth when it's open to stun it, and never mind, this fight's actually really easy. After that's over, we stumble across this egg, and out pops, kill it! I can't kill it. Well, let's head back to the ship and leave, I guess. So much for exterminating every single last Metroid. This seems really out of character for Samus. I mean, I guess it is kind of cute how it helps break some obstacles on the way back to your ship. And I do really like the song that plays during this.
You know, this implies that Metroids do that thing where they just assume the first living creature they see is their mother. I don't know, I guess that's kind of interesting. Hey, look, credits! And that was Metroid 2. I don't know what you want me to say. I already said it at the beginning. My thoughts on this game are pretty much identical to what they were on the first game.
Much like with Metroid on the NES, most of the problems I have with Metroid 2 are due to limitations of it being a Game Boy game. I don't think it's a bad game, I like a lot of the ideas it has, it's just bogged down by being a little too slow and repetitive. It's obviously a game made while the series was still finding its footing, where the development teams had to just make do with what was available to them. I mean, just 2 years after Metroid 2's release came Super Metroid, which feels like the fully realized vision of what the first two games always wanted to be. But that's another story for another day.
You know, after actually playing Metroid 2, I kind of understand why it gets overlooked. It just doesn't feel like there's that much to say about it, at least in comparison to the games that came before and after it. It's the growing pains game of the franchise, which, hey, isn't a bad thing. At least growing pains means things are about to get a lot better. Even if it is pretty skippable, I do still think Metroid 2 has a purpose. It helped cement the Metroid franchise as a franchise, and it further showed what makes a Metroid game, which was really important for the success of the games that followed it. Even if Metroid 2 itself was pretty mediocre, having a whole second game with its own ideas to expand on and build off of is not a bad thing for the future games to have. The more games the series has, the more opportunities there are to find the ideas that do work and the ideas that don't. And for that reason, I think Metroid 2 Return of Samus is absolutely justified to exist. So the presentation was supposed to be on efficiency, which is not only grammatically incorrect, but also something I have a much more concise presentation on. There, you see that? I got rid of that old presentation so fast! Woo! Yeah! Efficiency, baby!